maliliit na negosyo. Using these policy prescriptions actually, yung may ganansya dito ay yung mga malalaking negosyo na nakabase na rin sa ibang mga bansa.
See, from OECD, FDI Restrictiveness Index, Philippines, third most restrictive in the world. And then in ASEAN, the Philippines, the most restrictive in the 10-member ASEAN countries. No, I objected. Because the Constitution is very clear, 1987 Constitution, no mention at all of any joint session, Mr. Speaker. And so therefore, I call for a vote.
I would first like to express my dismay to how the Commission on Higher Education and our educational system itself tries to undermine the capacity of our Filipino people to understand the Philippine Constitution. In particular, Mr. Speaker, nakasaad kasi sa Article 14 under Education, Section 3. All educational institutions shall include the study of the Constitution as part of the curricula. Mainam sana, Mr. Speaker, na mas marami pang mga kababayan natin ang makasama sa ating mga discussions. Subalit, dahil sa bisa ng CHED Memorandum Order number 20, Series of 2013, ay natanggal bilang core subject sa GE curriculum sa kolehiyo ang pag-aaral ng konstitusyon. Now, to proceed with my points, Mr. Speaker, actually, I believe the good sponsor is already familiar with many of my points of contention, as I am a member of the House Committee on Constitutional Amendments, and we have been presenting our points against the proposal so far and the basis as to changing our Constitution. Kaya po, para din mas ma-involve natin ang marami nating kababayan sa usapin ng charter change, I would like to use our 1987 Constitution itself as a reference. And actually, this is more of, I hope it can be educational to our Filipino citizens. Mr. Speaker, I simply would like to know the opinion of our good sponsor kung sumasang-ayon ba siya sa esensya ng mga provisions sa ating Constitution, in particular yung mga related po sa ating economy. Kasi yun naman yung isa sa mga ginagamit na batayan para i-justify yung pagbukas pa ng ating ekonomiya sa mga banyaga. Pero actually, ang dami pong economic provision sa ating Constitution. For instance, state policy, Article 2, Section 7, the state shall pursue an independent foreign policy. In its relations with other states, the paramount consideration shall be national sovereignty, territorial integrity, national interest, and the right to self-determination. Does the good sponsor agree with the essence of this section, Mr. Speaker?
The sponsor agrees with the essence of those provisions.
Also, Mr. Speaker, Article 2, Section 9, the state shall promote a just and dynamic social order that will ensure the prosperity and independence of the nation and free the people from poverty through policies that provide adequate social services, provide full employment, a rising standard of living, and an improved quality of life for all. Does the good sponsor agree with the essence of that, Mr. Speaker?
Very much, Mr. Speaker, especially on full employment and giving more income to our people. And that is why we would wish to have a constitutional convention to be able to lift all these economic limitations of foreign investment so that we can have job creation and full employment. I agree with those declaration in principles of our Constitution.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, while pareho po kaming sumasang-ayon doon, I do not yet agree with the approach. I will get back to that later. Now, Section 15, the state shall protect and promote the right to health of the people and instill health consciousness among them. Sumasang-ayon po ba doon ng ating sponsor?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Section 18, the state affirms labor as a primary social economic force. It shall protect the rights of workers and promote their welfare. Does the sponsor agree?
I agree with that, Mr. Speaker.
The state shall develop a self-reliant and independent national economy effectively controlled by Filipinos. That is Section 19 of Article 2. Does the sponsor agree?
I disagree. That is precisely the point of the representative of the Management Association of the Philippines, composing of 1,100 corporations, that this kind of provisions, that we will always have Filipinos effectively controlling us, hinders the growth, according to Attorney Peripe. Because precisely now it is globalization. If we prevent foreign investments to come here, then we are lagging behind investors coming in, and we cannot give more employment to our people, and we cannot proceed to economic development, especially post-pandemic COVID-19. So I disagree with that. That should be, according to MAP, that should be amended to take out, to be effectively controlled by Filipinos. That is from the business sector, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to pose an existential question. Kasi pinag-usapan natin dito papel ng Estado ng Republika ng Pilipinas. So if the state is not mandated to foster our national industries towards this goal for us to be self-reliant, what is the Philippine state for, Mr. Speaker? Kung ganun lang din yung magiging approach natin, while other countries, even during the time of the pandemic, they sought to protect their own national economies para hindi sila maapektuhan kapag may ibang bansang inaasahan nila, biglang lumubog yung ekonomiya, sila manantiling matatag pa din. Pero sa atin, Mr. Speaker, iba yung approach natin and I believe for many decades, that kind of approach has failed this country. Kaya hindi natin natutunang maging self-reliant and independent, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the reason we are failing in our economy is because of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, it was the Management Association of the Philippines, the PCCI, Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industries, businesses which are supposed to be protected by our constitutional provisions. But they are saying that it's time to amend now so that we lift this, because if we are only narrow-minded, then we say Filipinos, Filipinos, but they themselves see that if there are foreign investments coming in, then their businesses will also flourish because there'll be more job employment, there'll be more income for our people, and they will buy from their products. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are saying that we need the constitutional amendment now through CONCON so that we can have more employment, more purchasing power of our people, and the businesses which are envisioned to be protected are saying, do not protect us. We are open. So that is now globalization. Other countries have opened them, and they have therefore developed because they have opened their country for more foreign investments.
Mr. Speaker, I would in fact would like to know about the opinion, especially ng mga maliliit na negosyo natin. Kasi napupot sa discussion natin, ano ba talaga yung tipo ng mga big businesses na meron tayo? Are these businesses na nagpo-provide ng essential needs ng ating mga kababayan? Because for example, kung merong mga multinational corporations, transnational corporations, nakabase sila sa kanilang home country at napoprovide nila yung basic needs ng mga mamamayan nila. At dahil naabot nila yung paglaki ng kanilang kita, kaya na nilang mag-export ng kanilang capital, sell their goods and services, and even export their own capital papunta sa ibang mga bansa. But in our case, Mr. Speaker, yung mga big businesses na ito, I think, are actually just becoming conduits of imports na pinapasok sa ating bansa. In fact, yung mga basic needs natin, kailangan pa nating mag-import para lang mayroon tayong sapat na supply sa ating bayan. And kailangan din mapag-usapan, Mr. Speaker, yung ating mga MSMEs. Lalo na kapag pumasok yung malalaking negosyo lalo sa ating bansa, sila naman yung tunay na kawawa. In fact, Article 12 ng ating konstitusyon, sinasabi dito na dapat competitive yung ating mga industriya both in domestic and foreign markets. However, the state shall protect Filipino enterprises against unfair foreign competition and trade practices, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it is not true that only big business are in favor of constitutional change. In Cagayan de Oro, Mr. Speaker, we had the president of the Cagayan de Oro Chamber which represents the small, medium, and small enterprises, micro, small, medium enterprises. Mr. Ray Talimio of the Oro Chamber. And this is also echoed in Iloilo and other provinces. They are in favor of the Constitution. The SMSB, the micro, small, medium enterprises, Cagayan de Oro and also other provinces say, we need the constitutional change now. Why? Because if there is an influx of business, people will be able to buy their products of the small and medium enterprises. That is on record, and this is found in Cagayan de Oro, our hearing, and Congresswoman Franz Castro was there. And she listened to our businessmen who were there, small businessmen. And they say, yes, we need more businesses so that our people will be employed and they can buy our products of the small, micro, and medium enterprises. Mr. Ray Talimio, Oro Chamber, Cagayan de Oro City, SMSB, micro, small, and medium industries. So clearly, Mr. Speaker, big business and our micro, small, and medium enterprises are in favor of having a constitutional change now. And the proposed mode is a constitutional amendment. And the prepared amendments are economic amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, for many decades, ganun po yung pangako ng pag-asa dun sa foreign investments. However, at this point, I'd like to show a graph na nagpapakita po ng trends ng pagpasok ng foreign investments sa ating bansa. I'd like to request our plenary secretariat to show the graph because it actually would like to show, for example, nung administrasyon ni Ferdinand Marcos Sr., magkano ang ating foreign direct investments. Sa lahat ng mga sumunod na administrasyon, meron din na figures para doon. So, maaari po ba nating ma-flash ang ating graph for us to have data para ma-aid po yung ating discussion dito. Ayan. So habang inaayos po ang pag-project na ating graph, Mr. Speaker, allow me for the record to state these figures. Under Ferdinand Marcos Sr., $124.9 million. Under former President Cory Aquino, $3 billion. Under former President Ramos, $7.2 billion. Former President Estrada, $5.6 billion. Former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, $14 billion. Under former President Noynoy Aquino, $21.4 billion. And under former President Duterte, $40.8 billion. Ibig sabihin po, ang trend naman ay tumataas yung foreign direct investment sa ating bansa. However, Mr. Speaker, nakakapagtaka, bakit hanggang ngayon, yung usapin ng trabaho, problema pa rin? Ang labor export policy nagpapatuloy, nag-abroad pa rin yung marami nating mga kababayan, given na ilang dekada na yung naspan ng mga former administrations na ito. And in fact, every budget hearing, sa maraming mga pinag-uusapan natin, problema yung trabaho. Pero in fact, kung umuubra yung pag-asa lamang doon sa foreign direct investments, bakit ganito yung pinapakita ng ating datos, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, if we amend the Constitution, we'll have more than 20 billion. Let us now see the graph of the OECD. Because what was stated by the Honorable Manuel is the increasing. But we are far behind the increases of Vietnam, Malaysia, and we have Singapore and Thailand. Can we show now our graph? This will now be the battle of graphs. The graph of the OECD. We will show there that we do not belong to the top 5 in Asia. Malayo tayo. 20 billion, what is that? Vietnam is getting 50 billion, 100 billion dollars. So can we show the graph now? So we will show OECD report 2020. And then the next graph will be the World Bank. What is the prescription of World Bank for economies to prosper and grow? One prescription is Reduce restrictions to foreign investments. Reduce restriction. So can we come out on that graph to be able to say that while we have increasing, it could be more than that. And while we are showing the graph, you look at that. Yung yellow, Mr. Speaker, yung yellow is the Philippines investment. Look at how minuscule we are compared to Vietnam, compared to Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. We are not even. This is the OECD report. ASEAN FDI stack country by country indicates investments. You see? Maliit tayo. So what is 20 billion? And that is why we are saying, let us be able to accept our foreign investments so that we should be there already before Vietnam was down, very much down, including we were second in Asia. But then, yun, wala na tayo doon. Now let us go into the World Bank. World Bank, the prescription for better economy and the improvement economy. World Bank. Opening up, this is coming from the research of our good resident economist together with, of course, a resident expert economist, Stella Kimbo. It will create 500,000 jobs this year if we open our economy. Okay. So now we go to the World Bank. Yes, look at that. Mr. Speaker, World Bank top 10 policy prescriptions, and we need that because we are lagging behind in foreign investments. And I will read to you, what is the prescription? 1, 2, 3, fourth prescription. Reduce restrictions on foreign investors. That is it. That is what we are fighting for here, for our country. And if you will look also, what is the most restrictive country in the world, can we show now the restrictions as found by the OECD? We are the third restrictive countries in the entire world. And we are number 1 in restrictions in ASEAN. Can we have that graph?
Mr. Speaker, before we proceed, I would also like to present my views on the World Bank top 10 policy prescriptions. I don't believe that all the time the World Bank is correct. In fact, bahagi din po ng kanyang policy prescriptions, make regular employment contracts more flexible. Hindi po ba, Mr. Speaker, yan din yung ginagamit ng justification para lalong maging contractual yung ating mga manggagawa, Mr. Speaker? Kaya actually, kung merong similarity yung proposed na economic charter change, yung lalo pa nating pagbuyangyang ng ating ekonomiya sa mga banyaga, tapos yung pagiging kontraktual ng mga manggagawa, all the more sino yung makakabentahe dito, Mr. Speaker? Hindi yung mga ordinaryong workers natin, hindi yung mga maliliit na negosyo. Using these policy prescriptions actually, yung may ganansya dito ay yung mga malalaking negosyo na nakabase na rin sa ibang mga bansa. Kaya, Mr. Speaker, actually I'd like to go back doon sa mga punto natin na yung ingredient for economic development, hindi lang yan foreign investment. I'm not saying na hindi tayo tumanggap ng foreign investment. Ang punto natin, huwag tayong umasa dito kasi konstitusyon natin, again, Mr. Speaker, allow me to go back. The state shall promote comprehensive rural development and agrarian reform. Tapos, nandito din mismo, Mr. Speaker, pati nga yung sinasabing living wage para madibang po natin yung proposals na yon, which I don't agree with. Article 15 on the family, Section 3, the right of the family to a family living wage and income, Mr. Speaker. Diba? So, ibig sabihin, napakarami sanang magagandang nabanggit dito sa ating konstitusyon. Kaso lang, tila ba hindi natin nabigyan ng chance na ma-apply yung mga to. Also, Article 14, under Science and Technology, kung sinasabi natin na yung pag-asa natin sa foreign investments, magdadala yan ng teknolohiya. Supposedly, nasa Section 12 din, the state shall regulate the transfer and promote the adaptation of technology from all sources for the national benefit. Pero, bakit sa matagal na panahon na sinasabi din, okay, matututo tayo, mag-i-improve tayo, bakit hanggang ngayon wala tayong sariling mga researchers na pwedeng sila yung mag-research sa West Philippine Sea para hindi na natin kailangang i-lift yung restrictions sa ating constitution para mapapasok yung China para i-explore yung nasa West Philippine Sea, Mr. Speaker. Kaya with that, ang masasabi natin, Mr. Speaker, hindi naman natin talaga na-uphold yung constitution na meron tayo ngayon. We have weak rule of law. We have strong rule of a few people. Kaya yung ganong environment, it's actually bad for business kung yun yung gusto natin talagang mapaunlad. We weren't faithful to what is good in our Constitution. And now it's like we're saying, foreign direct investments save our country. Hindi sana ganon, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, it's a fact now that all over the world, especially in ASEAN, all the countries in ASEAN would like to really invite foreign investments. The Philippines lagging behind. It is our constitution that says, kayong foreigners, 40% na kayo. Who will be the foreigner who has a lot of money, will come here, give to Filipinos, 60% majority. They don't control the business. That is why they go to dummies. Piatto case. The Supreme Court ruled in the Piatto case, 64% pala. Ang Fraport, German. Kaya natalo. Kaya it took us 9 years to use our airport precisely because of these prohibitions. Ang ginagawa ng mga foreigners, they get dummies. And then, although it is in the name of Filipinos, they are in control. So they violate the anti-dummy law. So there are many effects of this constitutional prescription. Of course, you know, our good friend will say, high prices, inflation. This is precisely, we are answering that, our Congress and our executives. But it will help, Mr. Speaker, if we are able to open our country to foreign investments for the people who will have jobs. And when you have we have jobs, you can buy your food that you're going to eat, you have shelter, and all of those. And overall, we have a development of the economy. So can we show now that we are the third most restrictive country because of our constitution? We are the most restrictive. See, from OECD, FDI Restrictiveness Index, Philippines, third most restrictive in the world. And then in ASEAN, the Philippines, the most restrictive in the 10-member ASEAN countries. That is from the OECD. So who can now debate on that? Why are we against? Some people are against opening our constitution. When we can clearly see that the reason why we're lagging behind is because of this restrictiveness brought about by the Constitution. We are the only constitution in Asia, in ASEAN, which has provisions to limit investments. Only the Philippines. So are we going to continue with that, Mr. Speaker? No way. We in Congress is going to therefore use our power to call for a constitutional convention so that there will be an amendment to the Constitution and give more jobs, and our economy will be given that particular push to be able to rise up because we are post-pandemic economy. So you look at that. That is FDI restrictiveness that comes from OECD. See?
Mr. Speaker.
So we will know what is the graph of our congressman so that we can see your graph.
Mr. Speaker, the good sponsor asked if I will debate on these figures. Yes, I will. Actually po, ang pinag-usapan kasi natin ay restrictiveness sa Constitution. Pero ang legal frameworks ng iba't ibang mga bansa, hindi lang po yan nakarely sa Constitution. Aside from the Constitution, there are many laws, codes, statutes. In fact, we're comparing ourselves to other countries. Pero halimbawa, Mr. Speaker, sa Thailand. Sa Thailand, bagamat hindi ganun ka-restrictive yung kanilang constitution, but their laws are actually restrictive. Sa atin, habang in-explore natin ay allow yung 100% foreign ownership ng advertising. Sa Thailand, bawal yung full foreign ownership sa advertising, pati na rin sa lupa. Sa Indonesia, may similar din sila na mga restrictions sa kanilang batas. Also, they have a business environment that actually protects their micro, small, and medium enterprises, Mr. Speaker. Kaya kung ikukumpara natin in practice, actually, meron din silang mga restrictions. Kaya sa bahagi natin sa Pilipinas, meron na nga tayong mga naipasang batas, yung amendment sa Public Service Act, yung retail liberalization, pati yung iba pa. Pero ngayon, ultimately, pati constitution natin, gagawin din nating ganun na lamang kaluwag, di ba? So, with that, Mr. Speaker, I believe pareho naman kami ng gusto ng ating sponsor na yun ngayon, masolve natin yung trabaho, ang tagal-tagal na yan, yung mataas na presyo ng bilihin, na ngayon ang dami naghihirap. Pero it's more of the approach that when we differ, Mr. Speaker. So kung doon sa mode ng paano ba tayo magbabago na ating konstitusyon, Constitutional Convention. So far, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe na mas democratic ang Constitutional Convention kaysa Constitutional Assembly. I can see a significant difference between Constitutional Convention and Constitutional Assembly. Kasi we have 8 months bago mangyayari kung sakali yung election for CONCON delegates, October 2023. 8 months mula ngayon, Mr. Speaker. Unlike during usual elections na mas matagal yung paghahanda, aside sa campaign period, we already foresee, di ba, kung tatakbo tayo, mas matagal yung paghahanda. So with the limited time for possible candidates to campaign to become a delegate of the Constitutional Convention, hindi po ba kung sino lang din yung may kakayahan na mag-field ng kandidato at magpanalo, sila lang din naman yung makakaupo dun sa Constitutional Convention, Mr. Speaker?
Let me first answer, Mr. Speaker, the first point of the gentleman. In these countries, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, he's saying that there are restrictions. But there is a big difference between restrictions in the Constitution and restrictions by law. Because you cannot have any legislation that will violate the Constitution. So it's very correct that in Malaysia, Thailand, there are restrictions, but it is by law. And the legislature will be able to get the expert opinion of the departments and the ministries to be able to say which could be open now. But our situation is different from Vietnam, from Thailand, and Malaysia. These countries do not have constitutional provisions limiting foreign investments. They are by law, and that is why our purpose here is to lift this so that by law, we're going to decide which one will be 100%, which one will be 30%. In other words, let the legislature do it because it is more flexible to the times. And our restrictions go way back to 1935. We cannot have investments. That is why we're lagging behind from 35, then to the 87, 73 Constitution, andyan pa rin. Tapos 87, andyan pa rin. Yung 60-40, public utilities, 40% ka lang ha, for foreign investment. Development natural resource, 40%. Education, 40. Advertising, 30. Media, 0. So in other words, I would like to state that even Congressman Manuel has said that these countries, they have no constitutional provisions limiting them. It's only legislation. And there's a big difference when you have the Constitution itself preventing foreign investments. In answer now to the CONCON or our CONAS or the mode of Constitutional Convention, he says that we have only about 9 months from February, if we approve this, and then up to October. 9 months. Mr. Speaker, the campaign period for president, this is very, very important, it's only 90 days. And as congressmen, 45 days. And for the election with delegates October 30, we have 7 months. So this is sufficient time. If we approve this now, there is sufficient time to determine who are the best to represent our districts and who are the best to be appointed by the Speaker and the Senate President for the experts and the sectoral representatives. So the time period is very clear. It is favorable to up to the election of our delegates. October pa yan eh. October 30, 2023, wherein the barangay elections and SK will be held, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, since may binalik kang punto yung ating good sponsor, what I was pointing at is kung paano ba talaga na-actualize ng iba't ibang mga bansa yung kanilang objectives for their national development. Ibig sabihin na combination siya ng iba't ibang mga bagay. Kung sa atin, sa Pilipinas, no, meron tayong mga gustong protektahang industriya, kaya nandyan yung mga protection sa ating constitution. Actually, hindi naman ito sinasabi na bawal or hindi tayo magpapasok ng mga foreign investments. Actually, napatunayan din naman, di ba, na actually kung gugustuhin talaga natin na mas magbukas, nandyan yung pinagdebatihan din nung nakaraan, yung cha-cha in chops pa nga kung tinawag. Kasi hindi binago yung konstitusyon, pero napayagan yung full foreign ownership sa retail, sa public services, di pa pang mga bagay, Mr. Speaker. So again, it goes with ano yung combination ng iba't ibang mga legal na batayan at kung paano ito na isa sa praktika nung ating iba't ibang mga agencies, tsaka kasama syempre yung mga industries. Lalo na't na-point out din kahit sa ating mga committee deliberations na actually kahit ibuyang-yang pa natin lahat-lahat pero kung wala yung rule of law, kung hindi din ganun ka ganda yung ating iba't ibang policies in line with how to foster a good and fair business environment, paano natin natitigil yung mga unfair trade practices, yung mga iba't iba pang hindi kaaya-aya doon sa ating merkado, hindi din naman magiging attractive yung ating bansa to foreign investments, Mr. Speaker. Also, doon sa punto on constitutional convention, again, it will boil down kapag merong differences doon sa yung mga ipapanukalang pagbabago sa konstitusyon at hindi masettle yung differences, magbobotohan. So, ibig sabihin, ang danger dito, Mr. Speaker, is that sa ating layunin na maging mas democratic, quote-unquote, through constitutional convention, baka ang kahinat na nito, Mr. Speaker, ma-mirror lang din kung paano ngayon yung playing field sa ating bansa. Na I think we have to self-reflect and be honest, Mr. Speaker, na example yung mga affected sectors like yung ating mga indigenous people, yung ating mga magsasaka, di ba? Yung ating workers. If they want to be part and get elected, di mahirapan sila na makapagpanalo ng kanilang mga sarili. At kahit pa meron tayong appointments, this is still not a guarantee that the CONCON will essentially be different from a CONAS, Mr. Speaker.
Let me first go, Mr. Speaker, to what was stated that Congress can make some laws liberalizing investments. And the Public Service Act was approved and took out telecommunication and airports, Republic Act 11659. Mr. Speaker, right now this law that we have passed is under legal question. In the Supreme Court now is the case of Luis Berango versus Department of Education, CAAP, and the National Telecommunications Commission. What is this petition about? Just filed last year. The petition says that the law we passed liberalizing airports and telecommunications to be not considered as public utilities, according to the case, is unconstitutional. Because our Constitution provides that public utilities would limit 60-40. So what did this case say? Unconstitutional. No matter what we do here in Congress, this may become unconstitutional because we cannot redefine public utilities. Public utilities has a history of cases wherein transportation, telecommunications, water, light, energy are public utilities. So that is the first case filed. And that is why we cannot depend on legislation because our Constitution reigns supreme over legislation. The second case, Mr. Speaker, here is the case of the United Filipino Consumers and Commuters represented by President Rodolfo Javillana Jr. versus Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin, Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri, and now Speaker Martin Romualdez. Very, very recent case. Once again, they are maintaining, it's now in the Supreme Court, that there can be no redefinition of public utility because public utility as defined in the Public Service Act and also other laws. Public utility will consist, transportation is always one, and we all know that. Second, telecommunications, and this new law has removed them from public utility. So these are now a stumbling block. Who will now come in to invest on transportation when there are two cases in the Supreme Court, wherein the Supreme Court may decide that these are unconstitutional? So what happens to their millions of investment? So that is the situation, Mr. Speaker. And also, Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court recently decided in the case of the Joint Marine Exploration Survey, Vietnam, the Philippines, and China. The Supreme Court ruled that the exploration made by China in the South Philippine Seas are illegal and unconstitutional because the Constitution says all exploration, including pre-exploration, is exploration, and so therefore no foreign investors can come in and even explore 100% foreign. It should be Filipinos, 60-40. That is a decision of the Supreme Court. And if we do not change it by law, the same situation is that our investments in public utility, development natural resources, including our oil and gas, we have to always have Filipinos which do not have the proper resources to dig into direct to bank. So that is the present situation. So what is the solution? The solution, Mr. Speaker, is constitutional amendments. Now let me also cite, because this was pointed out, about restrictive economic provisions. We have here the paper of Secretary Dr. Jerry Sikat, Professor Emeritus of the UP College of Economics. What did Dr. Sikat say? And this is very clear in the position paper. The progress, Gerardo P. Sikat, he said, the progress of the tiger economies of East Asia, which are South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore, was fueled by the heavy participation of foreign capital. Quoting Dr. Sikat. Next paragraph. The steady progress of Thailand and Malaysia all these years has been made possible by the role of FDI's, foreign direct investments in the economy. The awakening of Indonesia lately is due to the important role given to the foreign investment policies in many sectors of its economy. Then lastly, the rapid progress of Vietnam lately has been massively pushed by a heavy dose of foreign capital infusion. You see, Mr. Speaker, this is from Dr. Sikat, a colleague of Professor Estela Kimbo at the School of Economics, stating very clearly that these countries around us are very far already in terms of more foreign investments, and these are the impetus for economic development. And so I say, Mr. Speaker, it's about time that we amend the Constitution and be like Singapore, be or even more than Thailand, more than Malaysia. We can do it as long as we do not shackle the hands of investors in coming to the Philippines, being discouraged to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, distinguished colleague.
Mr. Speaker, actually, I'm glad that the good sponsor has pointed out questions on the constitutionality of some laws. Mainam nga na merong nagre-question doon, Mr. Speaker. Dahil, in fact, ang dinidirect nung ganong usapin ay hindi naman kasi kailangan na yung mga industries o yung mga sectors sa ekonomiya na vital sa ating bansa at yun sana yung basics na tayo mismo yung nakakapag-develop talaga, iasa natin sa foreign investments. Mr. Speaker, ang daming areas, ang daming pwedeng mga ibukas, no, na hindi naman nakakasagka doon sa ating inspiration or aspiration natin rather to have a self-reliant economy, doon pwedeng magbukas tayo ng investments for foreign investors. Hindi yung mga bagay, for example, yung exploration ng mga likas na yaman, na kung matap natin yan, kaya nating maging independent sa ating energy sources, for example, or hindi na tayo magiging largely dependent sa imported na mga energy sources. Also, Mr. Speaker, yung usapin din ng capital flight. Nandyan yung mga investors na kapag panahon ng crisis, hindi naman talaga sila yung ating maasahan. Kasi lalo na ngayon, no, na ang goal ng capital markets ay maging mas malapot, madali silang makapasok, makalabas sa iba't ibang areas. Pwede talaga yan na kapag merong crisis sa isang bansa, ilalabas nila yung ininvest nila kesa ipag-stay nila yung kanilang na-invest doon, with the noble intention na pangalagaan yung bansang yon. I don't think so. Ang gagawin nila ay protektahan yung kanilang investment. At kung lumalala yung sitwasyon sa ibang bansa, they would rather pull back that investment and find somewhere else kung saan sila makakapag-invest. Kaya kung magiging successful yung foreign investment, Mr. Speaker, nakasalalay pa din yan sa paano magiging matatag yung ating domestic economy, Mr. Speaker. Kaya naman, for me to cap this interpellation, I could say that charter change, even through constitutional convention, is a Pandora's box, which once opened will pave the way for provisions that stand against the general interest of the Filipino people. And just a few notes, Mr. Speaker, before I leave this podium, na kung magbobotohan po on second reading on the resolution of both houses number 6. Ang pagboto po on second reading, ginagawa po natin yan through voice vote. Ibig sabihin po, nagbobotan tayo, we say if we vote yes or we vote no, then mula sa members ng House na nakatipon, doon igigauge ng ating speaker kung ano yung nanaig na boto. Ibig sabihin po, Mr. Speaker, kailangan nakatipon yung members ng ating Kongreso kapag nangyari ang second reading. Ibig sabihin, physically present. No? While of course, we have due respect sa mga makakadalo through online means, pero mainam na ma-put on record at ma-announce kung ilan ang bilang ng mga mambabatas na nandito sa plenary session when voting happens for second reading. And since we are talking about the Constitution, ang pinakamataas na batas sa ating bansa, this is not like the other laws that we have been deliberating. Kaya mainam din po that we keep a record of those who are physically present on second reading. Same goes for third reading, Mr. Speaker, for us to announce the number of those physically present and keep a record of those members of the House. Also, a final note, Mr. Speaker, bago natin pag-usapan ang kahit anong House bill that seeks to implement resolution of both houses number 6, calling for a constitutional convention to propose amendments to or revision of the 1987 Constitution, dapat po ay matapos muna natin ang third and final reading for resolution of both houses number 6. Bakit po? Dahil pwede lamang nating pag-usapan paano mangyayari ang Constitutional Convention kung nabagsakan na natin dito sa lower house na gusto talaga natin ng Constitutional Convention. At yan ay kapag na-adopt na natin in full process yung resolution of both houses number 6. With that, I end my interpellation, Mr. Speaker. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, our distinguished Congressman Manuel, for that. On the matter, Mr. Chairman, of voting, under the rules of the House, it's very clear that proposed amendments to the Constitution, to call for a constitutional convention, to submit a question to call constitutional convention to the electorate, does not require a personal presence or a nominal voting. Because the rules of the House says that this resolutions like this coming from the Committee on Constitutional Amendments shall be treated like bills in Congress. And that is why, on the proper time, this will be an ayes and ayes. What is needed, just like our rules for other bills and resolution, is that on the third reading, each one will have to stand up because we will be counting 2/3 to pass this resolution. With that, Mr. Speaker, I thank again our distinguished colleague for his questions, which really also have helped this committee and this sponsor. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, there was a motion that this body has no authority to be able to vote on a resolution to call for a constitutional convention, believing still on the 1935 Constitution. No, I objected because the Constitution is very clear. 1987 Constitution, no mention at all of any joint session, Mr. Speaker. And so therefore, I call for a vote. We cannot go to a interpellation of the Honorable Manuel because there's a pending motion that we have no power. So I call for the vote, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, I move that we vote on second reading resolution of both houses, number 6, as amended.
There's a motion to approve RBH 6 as amended. So, those who are in favor say aye. Aye. Those who are not in favor say nay. The ayes have it. The House, the RBH 6 as amended is hereby approved on second reading.
Mr. Speaker,
Majority Leader.
just a brief manifestation.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we would like to recognize the Honorable Raul Manuel.
Thank you,
Congressman
Majority
Manuel,
Leader. Thank you,
Bataan
Mr.
Party List,
Speaker.
please proceed.
Now that second reading has been done, I think for the purposes of transparency, mainam din na malaman ng mamamayang Pilipino na ngayon pinag-uusapan natin yung ating konstitusyon, subalit sa ngayon, no, of course, with all due respect sa lahat ng mga kapwa natin na mambabatas, ngayon po physically present sa ating second reading, we conducted our voice vote with only around 40 out of the 300 plus members of the House. And we hope that in the upcoming deliberations, we have more members who can participate and join our voting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Not to have one house check the action of the other, which is the purpose for adopting a bicameral system for legislation, but rather to make the members of the two houses of Congress come together to break bread and take counsel from each other. As the Supreme Court has pointed out, the senators and members of the House of Representatives act not as members of Congress, but as a component element of a constituent assembly.
Congressman Lagman, I may kindly remind you that's already 12 minutes.
Yes, and
Please
according
wind
to
up.
him,
Thank you, sir.
I will wind up, Mr. Chairman,
Thank
Mr.
you, sir.
Speaker. We must never forget this whenever it is the Constitution we are dealing with. As has been said, charter change should be possible, but not easy. A procedure for amending or even revising the Constitution, which is different, which is no different from that of amending an ordinary statute, not only demeans a fundamental law, but allows partisan and passing considerations to prevail over what are truly felt necessities for a change. In deciding whether to propose change itself or to call a constitutional convention or refer the question of calling a convention to the electorate, Congress acts as a constituent assembly. Verily, Mr. Speaker, when Congress acts as a constituent assembly, it must meet jointly. I rest my case.
With much respect Maraming salamat, Congressman Ilang. Majority Leader. Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the parliamentary status of House Resolution of RBH 6 is that the Honorable Edsel Lagman put forward a motion to suspend the period of debate and interpellation, citing the need for a joint session between the House of Representatives and the Senate. Our honorable sponsor, the Honorable Rufus Rodriguez, on the other hand, opines that this is not needed based on the many legal provisions that he cited. With this, Mr. Speaker, because we have a motion duly objected, we need to divide the House. Just to clarify, Mr. Speaker, an aye vote means you are sustaining the motion of the Honorable Edsel Lagman to suspend the period of debate and interpellation, while a nay vote sustains the objection of the Honorable Rufus Rodriguez that we have to pursue and continue the period of debate and interpellation. May I repeat, Mr. Speaker, an aye vote supports the motion of the Honorable Edsel Lagman to suspend the period of debate and interpellation, while a nay vote supports the objection of the Honorable Rufus Rodriguez and therefore calls for the continuation of the period and debate and interpellation. With this, Mr. Speaker, I move that we divide the House.
Thank you, Majority Leader. As already explained by the Majority Leader, as stated, all those in favor of the motion of the good gentleman from Albay, say aye. All those not in favor, say nay. Nay! The nays have it. The motion is thereby lost. Majority Leader.